مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. خلال مراسم تنصيبه عام 2016 جاءت على لسان دونالد ترامب هذه الكلمات: إننا كل 4 سنوات نجتمع على هذا الدرج لتنفيذ عملية انتقال منظم وسلمي للسلطة، ونحن ممتنون للرئيس أوباما والسيدة الأولى ميشيل أوباما لمساعدتهما الكريمة طوال هذه الفترة الانتقالية. لقد كان رائعين. أعتقد أنني يمكنني أن أقول بمنتهى اليقين إن خطاب جو بايدن خلال مراسم تنصيبه لن يتضمن فقرة مشابهة. إذا تنتهي ولاية دونالد ترامب في أعقاب الهجوم العنيف على الكونغرس من جانب أنصاره الأكثر تطرفا، يجب أن تقرر إدارة بايدن الجديدة كيف تحدد أولوياتها، خاصة وأن الرئيس الجديد يتعين عليه أن يقرر إن كان سيحث أنصاره في الكونغرس على التركيز أولا على الأعمال ضمن أجندته السياسية الجديدة، أم على الأعمال المهمة المتعلقة بالتحقيق المساءلة والتوقيع الأعقاب في ذلك الهجوم على الديمقراطية. لمناقشة التبعات السياسية للهجوم على الكونغرس والأولويات المبكرة لإدارة بايدن، يسرني أن أرحب باثنين من أحكم الخبراء السياسيين في واشنطن، وهما مورت كوندراكي ونورم أورنستين. Welcome back to داخل Washington. 2021 is supposed to have been a much better year than 2020. But here in America, it started off with a vision of political hell. Certainly, that was the case on January 6th. Now, for many around the world, people can say it was over in just a few hours, with just a handful of regrettable deaths. And by the end of the day, Congress finished what it set off to start. So I'd like to begin, though, by asking both our wonderful guests, Mort Kondraki and Norm Ornstein, to ask you to explain for our viewers just how consequential were the events of January 6th. What do they mean for American politics and for American democracy? Mort Kondraki, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, this is unprecedented, certainly in my lifetime, and I think the idea that we would have an insurrection managed by the President of the United States is just almost unthinkable. So what happened was that the president invited all kinds of militia types, right-wing dissidents of all kinds, to come to Washington and try to overturn the results of the election. He's been trying for ever since the election by various means to do that, and his last ditch was to try to get the Electoral College ratification by the Congress upset, and he basically sent a mob of several thousand people to the Capitol to disrupt everything, and because of a failure of either intelligence or preparation, in any event, the mob got into the Capitol, wrecked it, went chasing after the vice president, who is now regarded as a traitor by the president, and other key members of Congress. And God knows what they were supposed to do: arrest them, kill them. In any event, the consequence of it is that there is now a bipartisan process of impeaching.
How consequential is this?
It's extraordinarily consequential. There was a precedent for this, actually. It was a pro-slavery to storm the Capitol and prevent Abraham Lincoln assuming the presidency in 1860. That's not a very good precedent to have to look towards, but this was very similar. And that this happened in our lifetimes, that this happened now, is stunning and shocking. And as Mort said, the president incited this. He did it before the election when he said that if he lost, the only way that could happen would be if the election was rigged, that he had enablers all across the Congress. We now have reason to believe that some members of Congress helped collaborate with the people who stormed the Capitol, gave them information about which offices to go to. We know that the mob that came in part because of a shocking lack of preparation or unwillingness to prepare by the Capitol Police and other police forces, a few of whom at least also were complicit with the mob that entered, that they could have decapitated the Congress and decapitated the government. And we know that some of them at least were intent on capturing, kidnapping, and probably killing key members of Congress, including the Speaker of the House, and as Mort said, instigated also by the president, going after Vice President Mike Pence. This was an insurrection. It was an attempt to overthrow a government and a legitimate election. It's not what we expect in the United States. And how we respond now is going to be a key. And one thing to keep in mind, even after this siege, many members of Congress saying they were afraid for their lives. They had to go into safe places or barricade the doors. They watched people get shot as they tried to enter the House chamber to either capture or kill them. Even after this, 2/3 of the members of the Republican Party in the House voted that Joe Biden's election was illegitimate. 145 Republicans in the House and Senate did it. So we have an ongoing problem that will last long after Donald Trump leaves the presidency, however he leaves it, by resignation, by being removed through the impeachment process, or simply by having to go on January 20th at noon when the new president, Joe Biden, is inaugurated.
So just to follow up on your last point, Norm, you referred to the large number of Republicans who voted not to certify Joe Biden's election. In terms of the mob, in terms of what it represents, is it your view that the events of January 6th were the last gasp of a fringe movement, or the ominous harbinger of what may still yet to come?
The latter. We know that there are large numbers of people out there who either believe in parts because of misinformation and disinformation that Donald Trump really won the election, combined with a sizable number of people, white nationalists, white supremacists, and others in groups who want to foment a civil war and overthrow the government.
Mort, let me ask you, you referred earlier to the process that's going on right now, the process of impeachment. This is the second impeachment effort of Donald Trump. He's due to leave office in just a matter of days. Why go through this? What's the logic here?
Well, the logic is that he deserves it. He's committed an impeachable offense. So there is some bipartisanship here. And what's really significant is that the majority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who stifled the last effort to convict President Trump, is said to be favorable toward impeachment now, toward conviction now, and Trump's ouster as a means of ridding the Republican Party of Donald Trump forevermore. There's part of the process that could ban him from ever holding office again. And my guess is that if McConnell has let this word out, that he's trying to organize enough members of his Republican conference to go along with him to get that actually done.
And so do you gentlemen both think that impeachment will proceed and a trial of President Trump will proceed before Inauguration Day?
Certainly, The impeachment, yes. The trial, very possibly not. Some of this is an effort to get Trump to resign, to leave early. And there's something we need to emphasize here beyond what Mort said, which is absolutely accurate. When you have a president who incites violence and insurrection, you have to take whatever steps you can to make clear that this is out of the bounds of behavior and that it needs to be recognized in history in that way. But there's something else. Most established democracies, when there's an election, the transfer of power takes place immediately. For example, in Britain, you have an election and the prime minister who is defeated is out of number 10 Downing Street within 24 hours, and the new prime minister moves in. Remember, he can be tried after he leaves office. Now, conviction is first and foremost to get somebody out of the office that they hold, but it can also be done as a way of saying you cannot run for president ever again, and to take away the very considerable perks that an ex-president has: a pension, a large staff, $1 million a year for travel, and Secret Service protection. So we may see a trial proceed, especially if more damning evidence emerges that he was complicit in planning a lot of this and helping to encourage it while the insurrection was taking place sometime later in January or February.
All right, when we come back after the break, we're going to take a look at inauguration and how Joe Biden's might look a little bit different from all the ones we've seen in recent memory. In just a moment. How you consume news tells a lot about you. If you read an old-fashioned newspaper, you're probably like me, a gentleman of a certain age. But if you're like my children, in their teens and early 20s, there's almost no way you walk outside your door each morning to get a paper version of the news. Chances are far more likely you get your news through your ears than your eyes, via podcast, stylishly produced audio segments that engage listeners in a way made for the 21st century. What do my politically engaged kids listen to? The Daily, an audio version of the New York Times through the words of their outstanding journalists. It's about 20 or 25 minutes, chock full of the stories you need to be an educated, informed citizen. It's not how I get my news, but you can't fight the future. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. Again, my panelists today include Norman Ornstein. Norm is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and one of America's wisest experts on politics, Congress, and the presidency. A native of the great state of Minnesota, he's a contributing editor and columnist for the National Journal and the Atlantic magazines, and an election analyst for BBC News. And rejoining us is Mort Kondracki. Mort has had an extraordinary journalism career that spanned, well, a very long time. Mort served as executive editor and columnist for the Capitol Hill newspaper Roll Call, Washington bureau chief of Newsweek, senior editor of the New Republic, and columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Longtime viewers of this show will recall that he and Norm were monthly panelists on Dakhel, Washington for the first 10 years of our 16-year run, and I'm delighted that the boys are back together again. All right, gentlemen, this show is airing just a few days before inauguration. When viewers tune in to watch that historic event, how will it be different from previous inaugurations? Mort?
Well, for one thing, I hope that there will be massive security, I mean, even exceeding that for Barack Obama. I'm still worried that I still think that they should hold the inauguration inside in Statuary Hall or someplace like that. But Joe Biden seems to be determined to hold it outside. I'm sure that there will be all kinds of bulletproof screens and et cetera, et cetera. So I would think that after that, though, assuming that all that comes off fine, that what we will hear from Joe Biden is an attempt to unify the country. Don't forget, there are 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump, and the vast majority of them still believe that the election was stolen, that the violence was perpetrated by left-wingers, not Trump's own people. So this country is horribly divided. And Joe Biden is going to do his very best to convince those people, and I think it's a very difficult job to do, that he will be their president as well as the president of the people who voted for him. And he'll be optimistic, he'll be positive, and he'll probably lay out at least the outlines of his first 100 days in office, to include battling the COVID pandemic and providing an enlarged stimulus package, and of course he wants to get his nominees confirmed as quickly as possible.
So, Norm, clearly one thing we won't have are photos claiming to be the largest inaugural crowds in history. What are we likely to hear from Joe Biden, in your view?
Well, first, let me reinforce what you just said, Rob. I've been to many inaugurals. They take place on the west front of the Capitol, stretching out, overlooking the mall that heads all the way down to the Washington Monument. And they're filled with we wouldn't have that under any circumstances because of the COVID pandemic. But now we're going to have something very, very different. And there will be a very small crowd. And that's a good thing. It is a virtual inaugural. And let's hope that they limit the crowds and there will be a lot of people who want to disrupt things. What I expect from Joe Biden is what we've seen as his consistent theme throughout the campaign that he's run, and now reinforced even more. That is, there is a desperate need to unify the country, and that he will do everything he can to do so. And I expect a rhetoric that reinforces that viewpoint. How well he will succeed at that task is questionable, frankly, for just the reasons that Mort suggested. Right now, at least half of Republicans in the country still believe that the election was illegitimate. It was 75% before the events of January 6th. There are going to be a lot of people who continue to look at Joe Biden as an illegitimate president. And whether the president who remains, under any circumstances, the number one opinion leader in the country, whether this president will be heard by a significant number of them, and how many Americans decide that it really is time to try and turn the page, this inaugural address at least will be an opportunity to try and do something like that. But he's going to confront, remember, after this, a deeply divided Congress, a narrow, razor-thin majority for Democrats in the House of Representatives. For a while, they will have barely more than one member over the 218 that make a majority, because 3 of their members at least are going to be leaving and going into the Biden administration, and a 50-50 Senate where the Vice President Kamala Harris will have to spend much of her time presiding over the Senate to break those ties. That's a challenge that will be very great as well, to try and accomplish anything on his very.
So if both of you have underscored the desire for Joe Biden to create unity, what do you think is Joe Biden's view on the question of impeachment? Impeachment for some people is unity, for other people it's divisiveness. What do you think Joe Biden thinks about this, Mort?
Well, he's indicated that he thinks that the Senate can divide its time between the tasks that he wants them to perform in terms of confirmation of his appointees, getting a robust COVID strategy underway, pass a stimulus bill, et cetera, and at the same time do impeachment.
We have to look with a longer view as well. It's not that he can enact all of his policies. It's also going to be whether, starting with that first 100 days, he can move us away from the corrosive tribalism that has dominated our politics for the last number of years.
All right. On that note, I'm going to say thank you to Mort Kondracki and Norm Ornstein. Thank you for helping us make this transition from the Trump era to the Biden administration. And I'm delighted to have you both back with me. And I hope we can do this again very soon. Thank you. Happen in other countries, but they don't happen here. We've all seen footage of coups, rebellions, and insurrections on television, movies, and old newsreel. But they're always in faraway lands, speaking different languages, attacking other countries' institutions of government. Never in my wildest imagination would I have ever thought it would happen here. A terrorist conspiracy leading to an attack on Congress? Well, regrettably, that's been in the realm of the possible ever since 9/11. In fact, an entire television series was based on that fictional premise. But an open mass attack by Americans on their elected representatives with the intent of impeding the constitutional process, affirming the people's choice of our next president, and perhaps to injure and even kill the congressional leaders managing that process? And to cap off the unimaginable, who would have added to this mix the notion that the duly elected president of the United States would himself address the crowd from which the attackers emerged, providing support, encouragement, and blessing? I remain an optimist about America, about the strength of our institutions, the resilience of our democracy, the decency of our people. As an historian who often takes the long view, I am confident our great-grandchildren will look back on this episode with a mix of curiosity and horror, as we do other outrages in our history, from the Civil War to Jim Crow to the internment of Japanese during World War II. I believe our nation will recover as we have recovered from outrages before. It's a process, and it will take time, effort, pain, and healing. The attack on Congress was the most extreme, visceral, bloody outrage, but it was not something that just bubbled up the morning of January 6th and then dissipated that evening. Its roots are deep, far deeper even than the actions and statements of our outgoing president. Yes, they lie in grievance, some real, some imagined, some stoked by bizarre and unprincipled conspiracy theorists and fear-mongerers. What is real deserves addressing. What is imagined deserves debunking. And what is stoked by malefactors deserves to be denounced, with its advocates ostracized, and where appropriate, punished. Donald Trump's 2016 inaugural speech will not be quoted much, especially given what now seems its macabre, almost preternatural reference to American carnage. But I would like to close with some of its opening lines, ironically appropriate for the task facing President Biden. And I quote, "We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and to restore its promise for all of our people. Together, the course of America and the world for years to come. We will face challenges, we will confront hardships, but we will get the job done. I wish our new president all success." بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول مستقبل دونالد ترامب السياسي، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاغ Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل وإلى أن ألقاكم، شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.